Buckle your seatbelts, boys and girls, because I'm about to go on an explosive rant. Listen, I'm a SEGA fanboy, and for decades, fans have debated and questioned why the SEGA Dreamcast failed. This video is going to expose the truth of why the Dreamcast actually failed. Many of the theories that have been given as to why the Dreamcast failed, a lot of them aren't really true. Although there's little truths in there, it mostly was not because of the reasons that most people give as for the failure of the Dreamcast. So much blame is given to the PS2, and all these documentaries you see about the Dreamcast and stuff, and fans, they're always like, oh, the PS2 is coming out, the PS2. No. Xbox was the enemy. So why did Sega stop producing the Sega Dreamcast? Why did they cancel the Sega Dreamcast? Well, it's all because of our buddy here, Peter fucking Moore. Peter Moore is a fucking asshole. And I'm going to explain it to you. And I don't care if this video's fucking 10 hours long, because I'm one of the biggest Sega fans out there, and this needs to be talked about. People need to talk about this. The truth needs to be exposed, okay? So, there's been a lot of talk about Peter Moore's character in the video game business. He started off in the early 2000s in the video game industry, okay? And he really came out of nowhere. He began working for Sega when they were developing the Sega Dreamcast, okay? So, the Dreamcast launches, right? 1999 in the USA, 1998 Japan. In the United States, the Sega Dreamcast had software built in it that was powered by Microsoft Windows. The Sega Dreamcast was revolutionary because it was the first console with online gaming. Yes, it was primitive. Yes, like it mostly didn't work, but it was there and it was implemented. And it was a sign of Sega being innovative for the future. And yes, this was the first fucking console to do that. But what happened through time? Well, Xbox got that big claim to fame. Xbox became the big console to be the first one that exploded with Xbox Live. Yeah, assholes, guess who started that shit? Sega. Okay? Basically, there's been a lot of theories about Mr. Peter fucking Moore. One of them is that he basically was just there as like a secret agent who actually was friends with Bill Gates, and he was just there to test out the Dreamcast as like a guinea pig to see if this kind of console would be successful in the video game market to consumers. And then the whole plot was to see if it worked, and then basically he took all their ideas that they did with the Dreamcast, and then he fucking left Sega to work for Microsoft when the Xbox was launching. Yeah, that's fucking right. That's Mr. Peter fucking Moore, okay? That shithead. What I heard was that Peter fucking Moore had meetings and he convinced Sega to stop selling the Sega Dreamcast and to get out of the video games market. That's what I heard. That's what Peter Moore did. And he convinced them to stop selling and stop trying to market the Sega Dreamcast and to stop being a console manufacturer. And then what did his fucking ass do? He went to Xbox. So, basically, if you look back in history, in the year 2000, the Dreamcast was selling like hotcakes. It was doing fucking marvelous. So many endless games were released for the Sega Dreamcast in the year 2000. Things were doing really fucking well. It was selling. The Dreamcast was the new big thing. Everything was perfectly fine, and they were successful. Now, Sega was hemorrhaging money at the time. We all know this. But if they stayed the course and kept trying to make excellent games, which were coming out for the Dreamcast, then I think they would have been perfectly fine once the GameCube, the PS2, and the Xbox launched in 2001. But no, because Peter Moore knew what Xbox was doing, and the Xbox didn't come out yet. So they were still developing the Xbox. And if you look at the original Sega Dreamcast, the Sega Dreamcast is the original Xbox. The same fucking controllers, the same concept of online gaming. Also, once the announcement that the original Xbox was coming out, Microsoft decided that they didn't want to partner with Sega anymore. That's right. They left them. So now, what a surprise. The Xbox is coming out. So Microsoft they didn't want the Dreamcast to be the successful live online gaming console. They wanted that for themselves. So they sent over Peter Moore in secret to gather as much information as he could and to basically use the Dreamcast as a fucking guinea pig for the Xbox. And what pisses me off about this is, like I said this in another video, Microsoft with the Xbox and the scumbag known as Bill Gates, and he's a real schmuck for a lot of things, but that's like conspiracy stuff. But still, this company, fucking Microsoft, they are such a creepy company with the whole Windows shit. It's all about just like, I can't go too deep into it because it's conspiracy stuff. And they take my videos down, man. They take them down if I talk too much about conspiracy stuff. So, but I'm going to try to focus on my favorite video game company, which is Sega. So, but just the whole Microsoft as a company, they're such a soulless company. They're not a company that has passion for fandom, and they did not go into the video game business because they had people that were working hard that made passionate games for a console. It was all just about the green. That's what Xbox was all about. As a console, all it did was really follow the trends of every other thing that came before it. And sure, the Xbox did gain an identity, but for the most part, it was just kind of the same thing as the PS2. So, another thing is, all these documentaries that have came out about the Sega Dreamcast, like the one on G4 back in the day in the 2000s, it was an amazing documentary. But the documentary constantly at the end talks about how it was the PS2. Oh, the doomed PS2 was going to destroy the Dreamcast. The reason they did that was because they were trying to protect Microsoft, the company of Microsoft. They were protecting that company. That's why in all these documentaries and shit, that's why they don't mention the Xbox. Oh, like it was doing its own thing. The PS2 was not that much more powerful than the Sega Dreamcast. Certainly it was, technically. I believe so. But it really was not like 10 times better than the Sega Dreamcast. Not at all. Not by gameplay, not by any reason, or any stretch of the imagination. And another thing is people fucking say how, well, the PS2 had a DVD player, so that's what ruined the Sega Dreamcast, because the Dreamcast didn't have a DVD player. So, people were buying the Dreamcast. It was about the games. Same thing with the PS2. It's true at the time when DVD was just getting to be new, the PS2 was the cheapest DVD player to purchase, so that made it a big deal for DVDs. So there were a lot of people that were buying the PS2 for that reason, and for that, it did have something a little extra that made it sell easy compared to the Dreamcast. But most people were buying the PS2 and buying the Sega Dreamcast because of the games. This was early 2000s. This was the silver age of gaming. It wasn't the 80s and 90s anymore, which I think is the golden age. We now entered the silver age. Things are becoming more technologically advanced. Really, the PS2 having a DVD player in the first place, the same with the original Xbox, is what I would consider the slow downturn of quality of game consoles, where it was the first bad sign, actually, looking back on it, that these game consoles were now going to be turned into entertainment consoles in the future. Where, it's it's a machine that does a million things, doesn't just play games. It's a fucking video game console. This is not supposed to be a personal computer. And that's my problem with Microsoft, is that they're a fucking computer company, which is respectable, but you're not a fucking game company, okay? You're not Nintendo, you're not Sega, you're not Atari. You're not all about your games. Like this whole thing, I hated it when the fucking Xbox, the first one came out. They had like a DVD remote that came with it. The same thing with the PS2. And it's like, what is this? A remote? This is a game console. This is not... No. A DVD player is over there. Watch your stuff on the DVD player over there. This is for gaming, okay? Let's look at the original controllers for both the Xbox and the Sega Dreamcast. Same 4 buttons. Same 4 fucking colors, same letters. The triggers on the back, which is taken from the Dreamcast, because they make a sound when you click them. Same thing with the original Xbox controller. The original Xbox controller was fat, just like the Dreamcast controller was a fat controller. Also, I forgot what the thing is, that there was like a device or something that you can plug into the back of the original Xbox controller, and I forget what that thing is called, okay? But It's got 2 slots in the back of the controller, and what do you think that comes from? The VMUs for the Sega Dreamcast. On the back of the Dreamcast controller, there was 2 spots to put your memory card, the VMUs. They stole that stuff also, okay? I think that the Sega Dreamcast could have survived for maybe 4 years if they kept going, and they did lower the price of the Dreamcast, from my memory, as time went on, because the competition was getting more fierce with the PS2 and the fucking Xbox. The GameCube was coming out. What they really could have done, though, is they could have made a new model of Dreamcast, sold it for like $90, and it comes with 3 free games, and now the new model of Dreamcast includes a DVD player option. That's what they could have done. They could have tried that, and it still would have sold. Another strategy would have been to make more Sonic games for the Dreamcast. And there were 3 that were phenomenal, especially Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. There were so many storylines in both those games, they felt like they were like 5 games in one for both games. So it felt like a long enough experience. Despite the fact that Sonic only had 3 titles on the Dreamcast, it felt like it was more, because those games were really long, which was amazing. But even still, another strategy could have been in like 2002 and 2003 would have been to have more Sonic games for the Dreamcast. They really could have been anything, just as long as they were good games or decent games. They didn't have to be a 5 out of 5 game like Sonic Adventure 2 was, because they didn't have to do Adventure again, at least for now. They could do different ideas before they go back to doing Adventure 3. And when you think about it, then when they got extremely desperate, and I mean like desperate, okay? Then they could have had Sonic Adventure 3 come out on the Dreamcast in like 2003 or 4 or something like that. And that would have been the real final gasp, ending the Dreamcast with a Sonic Adventure trilogy. And who knows, like the rumors and the news of an Adventure 3 could have actually got more people interested in the Dreamcast to buy Dreamcast, to experience Sonic's big farewell, and hopefully it won't be. Oh my god. Basically, Peter Moore, he would have arguments with people in the staff, and I have evidence to prove it as I go on. He really just wanted to bring down the confidence of Sega as a company. They were extremely confident. They knew what they had. They knew it was a phenomenal system that was going to last a couple of years at least, because of the money they had left. And things were going really well, but then you have Peter fucking Moore walking around, dark cloud, being super negative, talking all this shit, stirring shit up, convincing them to get out of the console business. Then he took all their fucking ideas, went to Xbox, and now all of a sudden Xbox is the revolutionary game system. Xbox is the one that pioneered live gaming. Xbox was the one that had the most impressive graphics. Fucking assholes. Before the Xbox came out, the most graphically impressive game console on the market was the Sega Dreamcast, by far. People's minds were blown when the Dreamcast was launched in 1999.
In the cutthroat video game industry, one word seems to be all-powerful.
The graphics.
The graphics.
Better graphics means it's more realistic.
The graphics were far superior to the N64 and the PS1, and people could not believe it. People were like, wow, it looks like real life.
And embattled Sega's new Dreamcast video game console is graphically better. The first home unit able to handle 128 computer bits of data at once. Twice as much as the Sony PlayStation and Nintendo 64 machines that dominate the $12 billion a year U.S. video game market.
60 frames a second, which is twice the speed of a TV. It equals graphics you've never seen before. When you watch a football game, it looks like you're watching a real game on TV.
Video game images are made up of tiny polygons. Dreamcast can draw 3 million of those polygons a second, up to 15 times more than competing systems.
Does that make that much of a difference to a player?
Yes, it does. It's more exciting.
It's really smooth. I didn't see any errors.
The Dreamcast was like the first modern game console, and it arrived kind of early in 1999, and people were really impressed by it. But when people are really impressed by something, and you got shady people who are not to be trusted, they take advantage. They take advantage of where they are, what's going on, which company has more money, it's fine that Peter Moore followed the money and he just wanted to leave Sega, but he didn't leave in a respectful way. He was a douche, and he still is a douche. Fuck you, Peter Moore. If you ever get to watch this fucking video, you asshole. There are a lot of famous assholes in the history of video games, and Peter Moore is way up there at the top of the pyramid. And I don't care that he's old now, okay? And I don't care that he does these interviews now where he talks about the Dreamcast and shit. I don't care. You were an asshole, and that's your legacy. For all the Sega fans out there, fuck Peter Moore, okay? There's this one channel, and I'm not trying to insult these guys because I love Sega, so I think they're awesome. This YouTube channel called The Sega Guys, they had this big interview with Peter Moore. It's like, come on, guys. You're Sega guys, right? You're talking to the enemy. You're talking to the guy that destroyed Sega as a company. The guy that basically ruined Sega from making game consoles anymore. You're like smiling and you're happy to talk to him and all this stuff. And you guys are blissfully unaware of the past history of Peter Moore, what he did, all this kind of shit. And it's like you guys are being bamboozled by your nostalgia for the Dreamcast. And nostalgia is an amazing thing. But we need to look at what happened. Not just be like, oh, I love the Dreamcast, but yeah, okay, but don't stop being angry that the Dreamcast failed. Don't stop looking for answers. The dream is not dead, not in my heart. The Dreamcast was one of the greatest game systems ever. Even to this day, it still is. The Wikipedia page on Peter Moore has a lot of really interesting stuff. So let's take a look at it, okay? It says, after Reebok, Moore was hired by Bernie Stolar to work at Sega of America. Let's talk about Bernie Stolar. Bernie Stolar became like the president for Sega at the time or something like that, okay? And he really cared about Sega, and he had all these great ideas with the Dreamcast, and he was in the G4 documentary. Everything he said in that documentary sounded right. He sounded like he actually cared about Sega. He kept talking about the failure of the Saturn and how the Saturn's not our future, the Dreamcast is the future, we have this new brilliant idea, we need to win the consumer confidence back. You'll see here as I read that Moore replaces this guy. They fucking fired Bernie Stolar. They fucking fired him. They were swindled by the charismatic nature of Peter fucking Moore. And Peter Moore is the one that ruined the Dreamcast. When Bernie was the right man for the fucking job. This is not the first time Sega has fired someone for being a great boss. At least the bosses in America. The bosses of Sega in Japan, they were all assholes. Alright, so, and like fucking Yuji Naka, he's another famous video game douche. Anyway, and then, like, just listening to that interview of Bernie Stolar of that G4 documentary, he sounds like this honest guy who actually cared about the Dreamcast. And then if you look up YouTube videos of Peter fucking Moore talking about the Xbox and shit during the early 2000s, he sounds kind of like a douche. He sounds like he just seems very sketchy as a person. Okay, so anyway, it says, despite his son owning a Sega Saturn, Moore knew a little about video games. Yeah, because he's just a businessman. He doesn't give a shit about video games. However, Moore quickly rose to prominence at Sega, being a big figure in the company's North American operations during the Dreamcast era. On August 11th, Sega of America confirmed that Stolar had been fired, leaving Moore to direct the launch. Moore became the president and chief operating officer of Sega of America on the 8th of May 2000. Oh my god, the pain of reading that. My heart can't take it. In fucking May, guys. In May of 2000. Oh my god. This is like the crucial year, 2000, before the other three consoles are going to launch. Oh my god. It's like the worst year that Moore could have been in Sega in 2000. The most important year for the Dreamcast to try to survive and be a champion of gaming. Oh god. Because 1999 was the big launch. It was super successful, but the year 2000 was when they needed to get down to the real nitty-grit, come out with some amazing titles, and they fucking did. But Peter fucking Moore, Dark Cloud. So let's keep reading. Moore has been proud of the success of the Dreamcast game console and the satisfaction that owners still express today. Yes, of course he was proud of it. He was proud of it because he saw what they were doing and he took their ideas and brought it to Xbox. That's why he was proud of it, because he's a fucking swindler. Including fans of the Shenmue game franchise. They're going to talk about Shenmue again, which Moore describes as the most vocal fan base during his career at SEGA. Moore disclosed to GamingSteve.com that this is amazing. Ready? Check this out, guys. Moore disclosed to GamingSteve.com that at a security checkpoint at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, a TSA security agent said, and I quote, "I don't need to see your passport. You're the asshole that gave away Shenmue to Xbox." Yes. Thank you, good sir. You TSA security agent. You are a hero. You are awesome. He was a Sega fanboy, that guy. That TSA agent. And he fucking knew and saw right through Peter Moore right away. Yes. You know, he thought he can get away with this being so unscathed from the Sega fans. No. This quote right here is amazing. Like, this is just an awesome thing that it's here, okay? I know it's Wikipedia, but this isn't frickin' 2008 anymore. I would say about 7% of things on Wikipedia are accurate, in my opinion. Oh, man. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Shenmue came out on the Xbox, right? But it was originally released for the Dreamcast in, like, the frickin' year 2000. And I'm sure Peter Moore was, he had meetings. You just know this Peter fucking Moore, he had meetings, right? And he was like, let's give away Shenmue to Xbox. Let's do that instead. Let's not put it on the Dreamcast. It won't sell. Oh my god, this scumbag. So not only did he take all of Sega's console ideas, he took their game ideas to Xbox also. Let's keep reading. Moore clashed with Japanese leadership. Moore commissioned to a focus group of young American adults in late 2001 and early 2002 to get a sense of how they viewed different gaming companies. Yes, this guy, he's looking at all the young kids. He's looking at everybody. He's trying to figure out, does the Dreamcast work? Does online gaming work? Let's see how much I can manipulate Sega. Take all these ideas. Yes, this guy knows what he's doing. He's not there in good faith. He is not. The focus group revealed troubling opinions about Sega. He took a subtitled tape to present to Sega leadership in Tokyo, and later recalled Yuji Naka accused him of lying and forcing focus groups attendees to criticize Sega. Moore asked his interpreter to tell Naka to fuck off and resign from Sega in January 2003. Yeah, Yuji Naka was a douche, but he did create Sonic, and he was great at making games. So, you know, Yuji Naka, he's Yuji Naka, you know, and the same thing with Peter Moore, but Yuji Naka is, like, far above Peter Moore. Like, Peter Moore is, like, the ultimate douche, and, like, Yuji Naka, you know, he was an asshole, too, okay? Because he was one of the people that didn't give Sonic Extreme good faith, and he didn't even help them when Sega was struggling really badly with the Saturn. Yeah, Yuji Naka is an asshole also, but I'll always respect him for loving Sonic the Hedgehog and trying to do right by one of the greatest game characters ever. And he's one of Sonic's big creators, you know. But even the asshole Yuji Naka, even he still loved Sega. And even he was like, you know what? No, fuck you, Peter Moore. We're trying to... They had Sonic Adventure come out that fucking Yuji Naka worked on because he loved Sonic and Sega loved Sonic, and they were trying to do new things with the Dreamcast, and Yuji Naka was actually helping them. He made a huge blunder when he didn't give them the Knights engine when they were trying to create Sonic Extreme. So he fucked over Sega during the Saturn era. So fuck him for that. But he made up for it when the Dreamcast was coming out because he helped them create one of the greatest Sonic games of all time, Sonic fucking Adventure. So he made up for it when the Dreamcast was coming out, so he kind of redeemed himself. So at this time, you know, he's getting a little older, you know. The fact that he accused Peter Moore of doing this is so awesome. This Peter Moore is such a snake. I love this sentence coming up because of how shitty it is, because of how hilarious it is and how wrong it is. Listen to what this says on Wikipedia, okay? It says, I don't know who the fuck wrote this, but it says, Moore is often mistakenly blamed for the discontinuation of the Dreamcast and Sega becoming platform. No, he's not mistakenly blamed. He is to blame. And he wasn't the only reason why the Dreamcast failed, but he was a really big reason why it failed. Like I was trying to say earlier, the Dreamcast could have lasted at least 4 years. They still had just enough money to keep going. And they really could have made some special deals with third-party manufacturers and shit. They did try certain things to keep getting the Dreamcast to sell. But what happens is when you got a fucking asshole at your company not spreading consumer confidence, confidence in your workplace environment, when you are a sad sack, when you are negative to the people working around you, when they're trying to create the dream, when they're trying to save Sega, this is what happens when fucking Peter Moore is running your company like this. And it was all about the Xbox to him. This guy is just a big no-no. All right, so let's see. What else does it say? Okay, so this is what Peter Moore said in this old interview, it says. And I quote, very telling. Let's read this. Because this is him making an excuse as to why the Dreamcast had no choice. It was gonna fail. This is his big excuse. Fuck you, Peter Moore. I'm not gonna believe your horse shit. Listen to what he says, this cocksucker. We had a tremendous 18 months. Dreamcast was on fire. We really thought that we could do it. Yep. Everything's fine, Peter Moore. Year 2000. Selling like hotcakes. Everything's going well. Now what's going to happen? But then, here we go. But then we had a target from Japan that said we had to make X hundreds of millions of dollars by the holiday season and shift X millions of units of hardware. Otherwise, we just couldn't sustain the business. Well, okay. Maybe this is true. Maybe it isn't. Peter Moore is a liar. So, but, you know, the bosses in Japan were assholes, so it's possible that this is true. But even still, if fucking Bernie Stolar was still working there, he would have told Sega of Japan, chill out, we're going to try our best to sell as much as we can by Christmas, but we're not giving up on the Dreamcast. We love the Dreamcast. We're going to come up with all these brilliant marketing ideas to keep selling the Dreamcast as a console, as a brand, and as a concept. And we'll keep working on the online gaming, and we'll try all these different unique ideas we haven't tried before. That is what Bernie Stolar would have fucking said to Sega of Japan. But no. Like, as soon as Peter Moore heard this, he's like, well, we're doomed to fail anyway. Time for me to go to Xbox. So, anyway, the next thing it says is, so on January 31st, 2001, a day that will live in infamy, we said Sega is leaving hardware. Yes. See, he said, we said. Yes, good job. It was you, Peter Moore. It was you that convinced Sega to leave the hardware business. Good job, asshole. You're the one. When all the Sega fans were playing the Dreamcast, when everyone was happier than a pig in shit, everything was going really fucking well, and this was the big future for Sega, and it could have kept going because a lot of excellent games were coming out for the Dreamcast, especially in the year 2000. And like I said, the Dreamcast could have lasted another 3 years. You know, don't buy into this hype that they lied to you about the Dreamcast. Oh, it wouldn't have lasted. They didn't have enough money. I get that they didn't have enough money to keep selling the console at the rate they were, but they still had enough money to still sell it, even if there was less of it, and still charge less money for it. They still could have survived. They really could have. Like I said, more Sonic games. They could have came out with more strategies. It really could have worked. And maybe even Sega could have teamed up with Nintendo and made a joint console together. It could have been like the GameCube Dream or something, the Dreamcube. That way, it would have been like Sega and Nintendo versus Sony and Xbox. That would have been really fascinating, instead of what wound up happening with Sonic appearing on Nintendo, and all that stuff. We were selling 50,000 units a day. That's pretty good. Then 60,000. Even better. Then 100,000. Better. But it was just not going to be enough to get the critical mass to take on the launch of the PS2. Big problem with the sentence right there. See, he was convincing Sega that, the launch of the PS2 is coming, guys. The PS2 is coming. We just don't have enough critical mass to take on the PS2. Oh. He didn't want to say Xbox because he knew where he was going. He knew he was going to leave them high and dry and go work for Xbox. So he tried to convince Sega that, the big enemy was the PS2, and we should be scared of it and give up, pretty much. Peter Moore is nothing like Sonic the Hedgehog, a character that never gives up. The PS2, like I said earlier, it wasn't, astronomically more impressive than the Dreamcast. When people look back on the legacy of game consoles, I often find that people put the Dreamcast in the same vein as the PS2. They're both like some of the most legendary, amazing video game consoles out there in history. And they both came out pretty much, for the most part, around the same time period. So the Dreamcast and the PS2 could have coexisted together perfectly fine. And no, Xbox was the real enemy. But he didn't want to tell Sega that. He didn't want Sega to defeat the Xbox. Oh, no. Somehow I got to make that call. See, he was the one. Confirmed. Out of his mouth. Somehow I got to make that call. This is what he says next. Sorry, I didn't say I was continuing to read it. Somehow I got to make that call. Not the Japanese. Good job, Peter. Good job. I had to fire a lot of people. It was not a pleasant day. Now, it does suck in business when people get fired. And so I'm not going to say I don't feel bad for him on that level, that, he had to let people go. But at the same time, though, he was an asshole. And the fact that people were getting fired, it was because of him. It wasn't like something from someone else that caused that. And now he had to fire people. No, it was because of him that people got fired. He's the one that pulled the plug. Now, if Peter Moore stayed at Sega for years after the Dreamcast stopped, then that'd be a different story, wouldn't it? But as soon as he pulled the plug on the Dreamcast, he went to Xbox. As soon as that fucking happened. What a surprise. This is why good guys always finish last. Bernie Stolar, okay? He was the guy that was going to put Sega into the future with the Dreamcast. But nope. This company, Sega, that we love, always got screwed by all these vicious, stupid, asshole business people in their company. All the time. Throughout the history of Sega, the entire history of this company, there's all these people that made excellent games, but then it was run by these fucking selfish assholes that cared more about money than Sega itself. Ay, God. Well, I think I've talked enough about Peter fucking Moore. He just makes me sick to my stomach. This guy is not this, hero of Sega. He's not a Sega legend. He's a Sega disgrace. He's not, a legendary figure in the history of video games. He is an embarrassment to video games because this guy just cared about money, guys. He is a traitor to the highest degree to Sega. When you look back on the history of Sega, they always were ahead of the game. Yes, they had people that made bad decisions as a company, but their ideas were excellent. Looking back on history, what was the first console with a CD? The Sega CD. It was pretty much the first. But the PS1 comes out, and it gets hailed as it's the console with CDs. Oh, and the N64 has cartridges. Yeah, assholes. Who started this shit? Nope, not Sony. Sega did. Sega CD. They started it first. There's so many firsts that Sega started as a game company. To be a Sega fanboy is an extremely painful and frustrating experience because we, as fans, we all know this was the best game company that ever existed out there. They were the coolest game company ever, with the coolest mascot ever. And they got completely fucked by all these people that worked in their company. In their own company. Just so ridiculous. Oh, God. Another thing I want to quickly talk about is the Sega Saturn. It's one of my favorite video game consoles. The Sega Saturn was a really excellent game system. It was just the people in this company, the presidents and shit. They did the wrong decisions by the Saturn. But what I hate nowadays is that people always talk about, why did the Sega Saturn fail? Why did the Sega Saturn fail? Listen, I'm fascinated by that topic too. But the reason Sega failed as a game company was because of Peter Moore and because of what happened with the tale of the Dreamcast, the story of the Dreamcast. That's why Sega failed as a company. It was not the Sega Saturn. If they kept going with the Dreamcast and kept going with it and keep going with the Dreamcast, then they would have been fine, and they still would have been around making consoles today. It didn't matter that the Sega Saturn failed. At the time it mattered, but when the Dreamcast came out and was really doing super well, then the past mistakes that they made with their consoles, it was irrelevant now. Because now we're in the Dreamcast era, and now they learn from their mistakes. So I just hate that people, like nowadays, there's more videos and more discussions from Sega fans about why did the Saturn fail? And less people are talking about why did the Dreamcast fail? Maybe because the failure of the Dreamcast was more sad. So people don't want to talk about stuff that's too sad. The failure of the Saturn was less sad because the Saturn was not the end of Sega. It could have been, but they still had more money. They still had some time left as a game console manufacturer. But you have Peter Moore there, ruining everything, being the Joker, lying to everybody. In other words, the failure of the Saturn was not the reason for the demise of the Dreamcast. The reason for the demise of the Dreamcast was because of Peter Moore. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. To all the Sega fans out there, do not stop being pissed off about what happened with the Dreamcast. The dream is never going to be dead in my heart, okay? And the last thing I want to end on is I'm a born-again Christian, so I take Christianity very seriously. So, especially these days, I do not like to talk smack about other people. I think it's mean, even if they deserve it. But I'm sorry. Peter Moore deserves this. If Peter Moore made a video tomorrow and he said, you know what, I'm sorry. I lied. I'm sorry for mistakes I made in the past when it came to Sega. I apologize. Then that'd be different. And then just shit from there, you know, make amends. But that's not Peter Moore. That's not who he is. So, you know, and that's another reason I didn't even want to make this video. Because, I mean, it's fun to rant about shit. But to say all this angry stuff about another human being, it bothers me. As a born-again Christian, it's wrong. But at the same time, when you're really passionate about something, and when something really is your fault, you should be blamed for it. And you should take accountability for your fucking actions, Peter Moore, okay? And he hasn't. And he went off on a lie, and he swindled people. And now, like, there used to be a little bit of videos on YouTube back in the day talking smack about Peter Moore, saying about what he did to the video game industry, how he screwed over Sega. And now these videos are gone. And now it's all about Xbox, because now they've been around for a while now. Oh, Sega? That's for retro gamers. No one talks about the Sega consoles anymore, except for the retro gamers. So it seemed like the whole game industry was like, oh, what happened to the Dreamcast? And then they're like, oh, well, I'm playing Xbox now, though. So that's ancient history. Yes, it's ancient history, but it wasn't as simple as people made it out to be as to why the Dreamcast failed. They gave all these really simplified answers. Oh, the PS2 was coming out, so that was it. That was the big nail in the coffin for the Dreamcast. No, No, guys, no! You guys were fed all these lies and propaganda over the years about why the Dreamcast failed, because these documentaries and shit, they don't want to talk smack about Microsoft, because Microsoft is like this conspiracy corporation that does way more than making Xbox consoles, and I can't talk too much about that shit. This is the problem. This is why, like, we've all been lied to. So, fuck you, Peter Moore. Make amends and apologize. My name is SuperPat98. Thank you for watching.